a familiar tale, a Florida high school has concerned parents reporting that a maths teacher's sugary attempt at divine indoctrination has been occurring. The teacher, armed with Christmas pamphlets, leads students on a divine journey involving candy canes, questionable biblical interpretations, and downright nonsense. The Freedom from Religion Foundation's Chris Line steps in, reminding the school district of the Establishment Clause and the fine line between education and indoctrination. With a dash of humour, co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Laurie Gaylor quips, public schools exist to educate, not to discriminate or indoctrinate into religion. It's up to parents, not maths teachers, to decide religious upbringings. Unwrapping the absurdity, FFRF calls for divine discipline in the classroom. This story is from the Freedom from Religion Foundation on the 4th of January, 2024.
And unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot to this story, but as always, kudos to the FFRF for being on the forefront of the battle against religion in our public schools. It's an important job, and I'm glad they are there doing it. Toy boat. It really bothers me that in today's day and age that there's still people that have the idea that this ardent, apparent preaching is going to be legal somehow in a public school. I have no idea how they think it's going to they're going to be able to get away with it. And it makes me wonder where these people have been living at, and so that they still have these 19th century ideals instead of living in the modern day. They have to know what they're doing is wrong legally. So why do they keep doing it? What is it that keeps driving them to keep going? Do they think their God is going to protect them from prosecution? I said prosecution, not persecution. Their God hasn't been able to protect them from the Constitution yet. So why would they think this is going to be any different? Why is the Constitution stronger than their God? What's going on there? Why do they think, what's the mindset of these people that they have no idea that they're going to get stopped by this? I just don't get it. Jimmy, do you want to add something to that?
I think they think that repetition is key here, and they're probably just trying to nudge their little plan along to maybe kind of, I don't know, pull up the big fish one day and get away with it. This is not really something we are unfamiliar with, right? We see, I guess I'm going to use the word attacks on children or victimization on children when it comes to this kind of behavior. People in positions of authority that are able to corner the children, and then children, not knowing how to respond to that authority or thinking they might face some kind of reprisal. So the people in this position have kind of identified their target, and they just kind of push along to see how far they can get. Now, as far as the Establishment Clause going, it should certainly apply here, considering that public funds are being used to run this operation. Theoretically, it's a little bit of a stretch, but public school, public servant, public teacher, the kids in that environment should be free from this kind of proselytization. But what I found interesting is that the Florida Constitution and its free exercise law states that religious freedom shall not justify practices inconsistent with public morals, peace, or safety. And I have to ask myself, what are the public morals in this area? I mean, this is Florida. Now, typically in this area, it's a little bit of a, I guess, left-leaning area where there isn't so much, I would say, the traditional or the wave of Christian nationalism picking up. But it's still Florida. It's heavy with, Latin roots, which is typically very strongly Christian and can be conservative in that respect. So, maybe these people think that, well, their own are going to look out for them, a good old boy system, if you will. So, Infidel, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, Kelly, when you were talking, I have to say that I think I know exactly what they were thinking. They're in Florida, and that is a hotbed of backwards thinking, and it starts literally from the top. Admittedly, if I were a parent of a student in that classroom, I'd want their heads on the proverbial John the Baptist platter. But the reality is this is just a symptom of the blue whale in the room, Florida, and a very backwards mentality. I mean, they claim to reject material that indoctrinates students, but they've made one of their required courses now is a financial responsibility class, and that's fine. But this guy Dave Ramsey is the author of the textbook, and he even includes proverbs inside the textbook they're using in the classroom to promote this type of thinking. And of course, it teaches that, debt's for losers and things like that just really are a whole nother story. I mean, Florida's even welcomed Prager U into their classroom. So, I mean, what we're seeing is, and I believe Phoebe may have mentioned this on a previous episode, about how we just kind of whittle away at a law, and then before too long, we're building precedent upon something that never was what the original intent was. And I think that's what they're wanting to do, like they've done with other issues, like they attempted for 4 decades with abortion. They're wanting to just whittle away at these protections. They think that over time, if they just push a little further, each test will continue to allow them to get more latitude in what they're trying to achieve. So for me, seeing Florida, being the state of education by right-wing talking heads, Dave Ramsey and Dennis Prager, they both literally want their dogma taught to everyone's children. They're in the indoctrination business. So the idea that a math teacher would take that and go, hey, let's run with this and let's see where this can go. I think also we have a very friendly Supreme Court right now for all the wrong reasons. And I think we have people who say, let's see what our money got us. Where's this going to end up? And so I guess the one good thing is that, I did notice the tired old story about the origin of the candy cane was included in the pamphlet. It's a good thing it wasn't a history teacher, because that would be an even poorer reflection considering the inaccuracy of what they're talking about. But I just want to go on record and say one thing. If there's ever a special candy made for me, say an I and made in my honor, make sure it tastes better than a candy cane. Damn. Now,
you are a real true heathen. You are a proper non-profit, you bloody heathen.
I am.
You get from me for the rest of this segment, and this episode, you get, downgraded. The other two, they're nice people. You are a heathen, and we can't have that kind of nonsense spouted around here. Are you secretly a true Florida man, like this Florida lunatic? Are you secretly a true Florida lunatic?
Infidel,
I've been exposed.
You do know that candy canes come in all flavors now, right?
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. You can have spearmint, peppermint. Yeah, you can have just mint. You can have a whole range of flavors. You can have cinnamon. You can have any flavor that you like now. I mean, the 21st century has been good for a lot of things. It's been good at debunking flat Earth. It's been good at debunking, young Earth creationism, and it's been really good at giving us flavored candy canes.
I must interject, Phoebe. You talk about me being a bad person. Well, I'm not the one who doesn't believe in the one true candy cane. Kelly over here was talking about different flavors. So you want to talk about heathen heretic, you handle your own house over there. But
all I say is, who on this panel has seen the TV show Murderville?
Oh, what a great show.
Who's seen the Christmas special? And I want to know when that candy cane is being put on trial for murdering Santa. Candy canes are dangerous, and I think we're seeing how dangerous they are when they are put in the hands of proselytizing teachers in classrooms. This is just how absurd we have got in this age. It's Florida. Florida has forgotten the one thing that teachers are supposed to be doing. Teachers are supposed to do what the name says. They fail at what we say in England is the Ronseal test. Ronseal, for those of you who don't know, is a brand of varnish for outdoor fencing. And the advertising was, Ronseal does exactly what it says on the tin. Florida, teaching, does nothing what the title suggests. It's absolute nonsense. You have these people who are spouting complete and utter rubbish. I mean, I want to go and take this pamphlet and I want to go and shove it up this teacher's backside, but I get done for assault and battery. But I can't go and prosecute this teacher for committing assault and battery on the senses of the poor children that sat through the classroom. They had to listen to this waffle and listen to this waste of paper. All I hope is that every student in that classroom at least recycled the pamphlet they were given so they didn't cause more environmental damage. I mean, we have Florida passing nonsense after nonsense after nonsense, complete crap coming out of Florida when it comes to education. You have Florida teachers that can't get pay rises because the Florida standardized attainment test metric means that they need to have their students have a higher average than the maximum score available for the teachers to pass the teacher assessments. This is how absurd Florida has become, and they have become detached from reality. I mean, you've got bans on what teachers can and cannot say, which a federal judge recently in another state said, these laws that prevent you from talking about gender identity and sexuality means you can't talk about any gender identity and sexuality. You can't use any pronouns whatsoever, even when it comes to cisgendered heteronormative pronouns. This is how absurd and how far off the deep end Florida has fallen into the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, I've got a real serious question for the three of you here. Do you think what Florida is doing at the moment and what these people in Florida, such as this lunatic nonsense candy cane loving teacher, is actually pushing the envelope in their favor? Or do you think people are getting so fed up that they're just going, we don't want this crap, and it's pushing the needle in the other direction?
That's easy.
Kelly.
I think you're right. I think, when the pendulum swings so far in one direction, it's bound to come back. And the farther you bring it into the one direction, the faster and harder it's going to swing back. And I think we're seeing that. I think we've been seeing that over the last few years now. This is why these people have lost in the elections in the last 3 election cycles. It started out real slow, but it's really building up momentum. And it makes me not as worried about the future as I have been recently. So I have a lot of hope for the future that people are finally waking up. Unfortunately, I've had that feeling before. Like I got that in the 90s. I really thought we were starting to wake up in the 1990s, and I don't know what happened. Somewhere along the way, it just kind of died off. But I think the kids today seem to be a little more aware of what's happening in the world socially and politically, and that gives me a lot of hope. So I'm hoping that as that pendulum does swing back, it does swing back harder, and we're seeing a more balanced society instead of one that's swinging so far to the right with these Christian ideals. Jimmy, what do you think?
Well, I think there are enclaves that are not really moving at all, such as maybe Florida being a good example, or specific maybe governmental or localities on the state and local government level that are probably just going to dig their heels in even further. Something that I think was disturbing about this story was that only one parent complained, right? I mean, this is a Florida school that was, had religious pamphlets being passed out, and only one parent spoke up. And I think that reflects maybe the society at large around in that specific area, which is, and that also speaks to the idea that Florida's constitution, like I mentioned earlier, states that nothing shall, I don't remember exactly the wording I used. I think it was, here we go. So free exercise, freedom shall not, religious freedom shall not justify practices inconsistent with public morals. Well, the public morals are defined differently in certain areas than they are for the rest of us. And so while children might be aware, they're still not in any more of a position to kind of fight back. It really takes their parents to kind of step up and do their bidding for them. And that I don't see happening enough.
Yeah, I would have to say that I think most of the children in that classroom are so readily indoctrinated in other areas of their lives that I don't think for the most part that it even triggered It wasn't even a thought of, wow, should this be happening here? It was just another day in the life of a person in Florida. Without a doubt, we've seen repeated attacks and integration of religion into the schools creeping in, and Florida has welcomed it with open arms. So for someone to go, hey, this is outside the norm, I agree. It is an unfortunate reflection of what's going on in Florida when we have one parent saying this is a problem. And I only hope that when something like this continues, because I don't think this is just a one-off. And as I said earlier, this is just this is ignoring the blue whale in the room as far as this one incident, because this is a pattern, and this is something that I agree with Kelly answering his question about whether there's been a backlash to it. I absolutely do think that we have seen that backlash now, but is it going to happen in a place like Florida? Maybe in isolated pockets. But those isolated pockets are still going to be under the thumb of the state government. So how far, what control they have is ultimately going to be decided more by the state, with some latitude with them. I wish them luck. I hope that this does change and we don't see this again. But I think that in Florida, I don't think we can be surprised if we see round 2, round 3, and ultimately a lot of things like this are going to need to be decided. And with a generous U.S. Supreme Court, if it ever ended up in a court system, well, I just don't know.
But I think you've all written Florida off. I think that's a problem here. I think you've written off the students. I think you've written off the parents here. Because what you've got to understand here is that whilst one parent complained, how many students didn't even bother to tell their parents and they just ignored it?
Majority.
How many of these students do we think actually took this seriously? It only takes one student to complain. It only takes one parent. Why do we not have mandatory pledges of allegiances in America in schools? Because one Jehovah's Witness family stood up and said, we do not agree with this. It violates the Establishment Clause. That's why the Pledge of Allegiance is not mandatory in schools in America. The case of Barnett, it took one Jehovah's Witness family who were chased out of their town that they lived in for standing up. It takes one parent to complain about a pamphlet like this. It takes one parent to say, I will not allow my right to be trampled upon. And the fact that there was one parent makes me smile, because somebody actually turned round to the educational establishment in Florida and went to the lot of you. And I think that is what we should be applauding here, not the fact that it was only one. The fact that somebody actually stood up and turned around to Florida and went, what the bloody hell are you doing in this classroom? How dare you, instead of teaching mathematics to my children, you're teaching sugar-based nonsense.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think they deserve commendation, but to the fact that it gets to that point, it's because there's so many parents that are following this trend of not doing anything. And yes, that one domino, right? That one domino seems to have fallen over. So I can't write off all of them. And you bring up a very good point, but I think I think I've written off the speed at which these enclaves will turn toward doing the right thing. One is certainly promising. Let's turn that into 2 to 4 to 8 and so on.
Now, here's a question. Here's a question. In all seriousness, to the three of you here, would you have the time and inclination to complain if your child had told you the story that is this story? Would you have actually stood up, taken the time, and followed through with a complaint? Would you have, in all honesty, actually done that?
Yes, without a doubt.
Or would you
I've
have just
actually
turned
done it.
around and said, look, this is rubbish, I can't do anything, and just thrown it in the bin?
I've
I
done
would
it.
have too, but you got to remember, look at the three people you're asking. We're sitting here
Yes.
doing this. So we're the kind of
But-
people that would stand up to something like
No,
that,
but
right?
And the
my
question is
bigger
also directed at the audience out there.
Yes,
and if your answer
that
to
would be
that-
more important. Yes,
And if your
yes.
answer to that question is actually, no, I wouldn't actually bother to stand up, ask yourself why. Ask yourself what matters to you. And ask yourself, are you comfortable with what happened in Florida potentially happening in a child's classroom near you?
Or in
And-
your child's classroom, even more importantly. And
and
that's
my-
one of the things, all three of us here are, that you asked, we're all parents. So it's a question that does hit home for us, right? And that's why, because I am a parent, I would stand up for it. So, yeah.
And one of my biggest concerns is the fact that, yes, one parent standing up changed things. I just have a much greater concern about how politicized our court system is. So admittedly, it's not a lack of confidence in Florida, because yes, it only takes one person to stand up. My problem is I lack confidence in many aspects of our court system right now making the right decision.
I also want to point out, it wasn't just one parent standing up. It was one parent standing up and getting the FFRF involved in it.
And I think that ultimately, if you see things like this and you're a parent, do something. Don't just allow the envelope to keep pushing. Don't keep pushing that envelope. Make a complaint to your school if this was happening near you. And if you want to hear me complain some more non-profits is available here.